I won't repeat the whole thing. I don't want to bore you, but I have to say it was a very good monologue I did one time on mythologies. How the Greeks in particular, the Egyptians and others, the formations of nascent religions and mythologies of old, they came up with ideas on how the world worked. There are some who would argue that Christianity itself is a mythology. I would disagree, but I see their point to a degree on how, I mean, the Greeks had this entire pantheon of gods, and they explained everything. Why did lightning strike? Zeus threw a thunderbolt. Why is the narcissus flower by the side of the spring? Well, because Narcissus was a very vain man who stared at himself so long he grew roots, and the gods turned him into the flower. Why did the sun cross the sky? Apollo on a chariot as Helios drove across the sky every day. His twin sister Artemis at night would do the same with the moon. None of it made sense when you stop to think about it. It's one thing as an aside, not to go off on theological side point here, but for 2,000 years now, Christianity has been surprisingly consistent. There actually are very few things that anyone can point out that are deeply contradictory within Christianity. And those where there are some contradictions, there are rational, thoughtful explanations for why, including, for example, supposed contradictions in the New Testament of the gospel accounts. Why is one thing somewhere? Why is Jesus supposedly has an encounter and then a second encounter later, but in the other book or first? There are reasons for who's being told the story, how the story is being told, who the audience is, that explain virtually every single one of those things. And even when you disagree with those things, even someone like Bart Ehrman, who has fallen out of Christianity and is a critic of the faith, will say that none of these things really, at the end of the day, contradict the basic tenets of Christianity, from the virgin birth to the physical resurrection of Christ. And there is a comprehensive worldview that comes from it. In fact, I would say, and I realize I'm biased in this, that Christianity is the only worldview that explains the world currently as it is and shows you where the world is headed. We are seeing with environmentalists, we're seeing with the left, we're seeing them trying to form a worldview, the environmentalists in particular. In fact, I really would encourage you, in all honesty, this isn't to get your money or anything, I wish you would read it today. If you will text data to 33777, I put in more precise form what I've been telling you on the radio about the return of the Dark Ages. On September 4th, 476 AD, Romulus Augustus stepped down from the throne of the Western Roman Empire. That is the moment historians say the world entered the Dark Ages. What came in the Dark Ages? Population in the West declined, global temperatures rose, and people began migrating around the world in greater numbers. Historians believe the Roman Empire's descent in 476 AD began the Dark Ages, and it did not end until 1000 AD. Now, 1,022 years after the end of the Dark Ages, population is declining again, temperatures are rising again, and people are moving restlessly about the planet, and we're entering into this new Dark Ages. And in those Dark Ages of old, superstitions began to take effect. And we see that with environmentalists now, but not just with environmentalists. We see it with the left as well. There are superstitions and mythologies to explain the world. And right now, much of the media is obsessively focused on disinformation and misinformation on the right. And everything you believe on the right is misinformation or disinformation. One of the pollsters I respect the most in the United States is a guy, he's a dear friend of mine. His name is Chris Wilson. He's worked for a lot of Republican candidates around the country that you know. He and I have been talking about the polling, and he and I tend to agree that it was not really a dour mood in the country for the GOP right now, but the Dobbs decision, in fact, it did have an impact. The Republicans' inability to articulate a response that calmed people down had a direct impact on what's going on. but the polling still remains particularly biased in favor of the Democrats. In fact, he told me in a text earlier today that the average error of media polling had the Democrats on average up 12.8% from where they actually wound up on election day. And we should keep that in mind. We may be missing the red wave now. It's smaller than it was, but still big, and we now can't see it because of the polling errors. I kind of think that the Republicans were boasting they could pick up a D plus 10, D plus 12 seat. Now they can't, but they can still pick up a D plus 3, a D plus 4 seat, which means they can pick up Georgia. They can pick up Nevada. They could pick up Arizona. I don't know if they will with Arizona. Blake Masters is a uniquely bad candidate, it seems, but nonetheless, they could. But the Democrats tell themselves their world is right. Their worldview is right. They have an accurate grasp on things, and the things you and I believe are misinformation and disinformation. So Chris Wilson and WPA, his polling firm, you can follow them, WPA Intel, or if you subscribe to the daily show notes, you'll find the link today. Text data to 33777. Let me read you this. With much of the media's coverage of misinformation focusing on right-leaning sources, we wanted to examine the prevalence of conspiracy theories and falsehoods on the left. We presented a nationally representative sample of voters with a series of statements and asked them to rate them as mostly true, somewhat false, or mostly false. Here are the results. Our national poll of registered voters found that 52% of Democrats, including nearly half of MSNBC viewers, believe the Supreme Court recently outlawed abortion in the United States. This is false. 52% of Democrats, 45% of self-described liberals, 51% of white Democratic women, 46% of MSNBC viewers, 54% of college-educated Democratic women believe the Supreme Court outlawed abortion in the United States. 54% of college-educated Democratic women, more than Democrats in general, those college-educated women are dumb. It's not true. The Supreme Court did not outlaw abortion in the United States. The end of Roe v. Wade did not ban abortion. What it did is it returned it to the states. And yet, more than half of Democrats believe something that is not true. In our poll, we also asked the respondents whether they believe the 2016 election was stolen by Vladimir Putin and the Russians. 45% of Democrats believe it was stolen. 47% of MSNBC viewers believe it was stolen. 42% of self-described liberals believe it was stolen. To their credit, Democratic women are less likely to believe it than overall, which is good because it wasn't stolen by Vladimir Putin. After months of left-wing activists in the media branding Florida's parental rights and education law as the Don't Say Gay law, we found 67% of MSNBC viewers and 74% of college-educated Democratic women actually believe Florida banned the word gay in schools. It hasn't done that at all. It's not even in the legislation. But yet, because of media coverage, mainstream media coverage, you should understand, not just MSNBC, but mainstream media coverage, 67% of Democrats believe that. 62% of CNN viewers believe Florida banned the word gay in all schools. Interestingly enough, 74% of Democratic college-educated women believe this. Where are they getting their news? Following a viral Stephen King tweet and a debunked Salon article claiming Florida requires professors and students to register their political views, our poll found 35% of Democrats believe it's true that Florida now requires students and professors to register their political views, but 41% of MSNBC viewers believe it, and 44% of college-educated white Democratic women believe this. 44% of white, college educated Democratic women believe a viral tweet from Stephen King that was not true. Our poll found that 60% of white Democrats, 63% of self described liberals, and over half of CNN's viewership who are unaware of some of their own beliefs being false attribute Republican gains among Hispanics to disinformation. That's right. CNN viewers are less likely to believe it than the others, but still 54%. 63% of liberals, 60% of white Democrats, 61% of Biden voters, 59% of Democrats overall believe this. Believe it's disinformation, which is remarkable. Now, interestingly enough, 23% of CNN viewers believe the reason Hispanics are moving to the GOP is because Republicans offer a better economic outlook than Democrats. Ding, 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 ding. And 32% of CNN viewers because Hispanics are socially conservative. Ding, 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 ding. This is remarkable, though, that so many Democrats believe these things, and yet the entire media conversation out there tends to be about misinformation and disinformation on the right, because there is a bias in the press about these things. Now, if you listen to me regularly, you know I believe people are stupid. And it really doesn't matter what party and what belief, people tend to be stupid. Generally, in a herd, they get even dumber. We live in a fallen world. People are stupid. But it's really striking to me how much of an obsession there is about disinformation and misinformation on the right, disinformation and misinformation supposedly spread by the right and on Fox News, and no one in the media ever wants to get the left to account for their own disinformation and misinformation. And the reason why we can tell is because they themselves believe these things to be true. There is a deep loss of humility in the country, in particular in the media. When I get things wrong, whether it was the other day on the impact of Dobbs or in 2016 on not thinking Trump could win, a normal person should be able to sit down and say, okay, I got this wrong. Why did I get it wrong? And no one in the media seems capable of doing that. No one in the media seems capable of figuring out why this wascally wabbit continues to win. Why is it that the world works out differently from the way their worldview says it should work out? Why is this the case? And a lot of it has to do with tribal echo chambers, but the media itself is so much in that Democratic tribal echo chamber that it doesn't realize that maybe the world isn't as they believe because they don't have anyone piercing their bubble of disinformation to share with them the way the world actually works. Rarely do those moments come along. And I think this gets also into where this election is headed, because I do think it is true objectively Republicans are going to have a harder time with a massive wave. But I still think Republicans win. Maybe not the Senate, although I think they do by one. But they're definitely going to win the House. And yet you have Democrats now more and more convincing themselves that it's not even inevitable on the House side that this happens, despite redistricting and headwinds and everything else, because that bubble thinking becomes so dangerous. And it's one reason, dear listeners of mine, and readers of all of the stuff that I write, I try very hard to make a good faith effort to tell you what is actually going on in the world and not what you think is going on in the world, because just like with the left, sometimes those things aren't true. And I don't always get it right, which is why I try to correct the record when I get it wrong. I'm not perfect either, but I try to do my best to give you an accurate lay of the land so there are no surprises as best we can help it, when so many people on the left and the right these days just want to tell you what you want to hear. And when you're always told what you want to hear, you tend to begin to believe the mythologies that are not real and cannot believe anyone who comes to tell you they're wrong. And you think the person who's telling you the truth is lying to you because the liars profit from deluding you, just like MSNBC's viewers are helping MSNBC make a profit, all while being comfortably lied to, told that their worldview is right, and affirmed in everything they believe. And they'll be deluded when they get to election day and Republicans do pretty good at the ballot box.